We're no longer accidentally well. Our parents didn't have to know how to move us, how to feed us, to manage our sleep. We just basically got that, the basic expectations of our genetic material were served to us by our environment through basically no effort of our own. I mean, none of us paid any attention to puberty. We just came out the other side. And now that's no longer the case for young people because the conditions on the ground have changed so dramatically. And today we have a realization that as technology marches forward in this continuously unbridled fashion, we're beginning to understand that this technology could harm us. And especially now, given all of the conversation around AI and the future that will likely host artificial general intelligence. But I think that this conversation still suggests that technology is going to harm us in the future. And what I saw with, practicing and meeting all these young men and women was that technology is already harming society in ways that, of course, the children act as the canary in the coal mine and are able to show us that changing conditions on the ground so drastically, we can basically invent things over the weekend, and here they are, with no ability to measure what is the impact in the society.
This is the Play Your Position podcast, where we huddle up, call the plays, and inspire you to run your ball into the end zone. Are you ready to score more game-winning touchdowns in your life, business, and career? Then listen up, because it's game time, baby. Now, here's your host, Mary Lou Kaiser.
Hello, Team PYP. Mary Lou Kaiser here. Welcome to today's episode of the Play Your Position podcast. I'm excited you have joined us today because it is game day here at PYP, and I have a fantastic guest ready, suited up. She is going to take the field and take us on a journey unlike any other that we have had here in the 10 years that I have been doing this podcast. I have never talk to somebody with her background. Her name is Brigitte Piniewski, and she's coming to us from Portland, Oregon. Brigitte, are you ready for kickoff?
Yes, thank you, Mary Lou. This is exciting.
It is so exciting. So, team, here are some things that I know about Brigitte. First of all, she's a physician, ex-healthcare executive, researcher, author, and angel investor who has witnessed healthcare from almost every angle. More recently, while providing investor education in the Web3 ethos, she appreciated the potential for pivotal health transformation now possible using new distributed ledger approaches. However, our health industry would need multidisciplinary experts to update their understanding of the possibilities Web3 might enable. Thus, her book, Wealthcare, Demystifying Web3 and the Rise of Personal Data Economies provides a starter pack of sorts to engage diverse stakeholders to share a common vision and vocabulary. Together, we should expect to design and deliver both health and wealth to our communities in perpetuity. Now, team, that is a mouthful of fantastic and deep information, and Brigitte is going to take us inside the future. We're looking at where are we going, specifically with our healthcare, but on broader scale too. And I can just tell you, this is going to be fantastic. So, Brigitte, again, welcome to the show. Let's dive in and have you set the stage for us, provide some context about when you got the call to leadership. How old were you? What was going on in your life? And then connect the dots to what you're doing today with this whole Web3 emerging ecosystem that a lot of us have heard little bits about, but it's still very outside of our realm of understanding.
Oh, well, thank you, Mary Lou. So let me think. I had already been in practice for about a decade And increasingly, my practice that began in Canada, seeing very, wide range of diverse populations. I was in Vancouver, Canada, doing deliveries for families. And my baby board showed people from all over the globe, maybe 10% were Caucasian. And then our family moved to Idaho. And for the first time, I was struck by how unwell the children were, because I thought, gosh, if we just did those 9 months correctly, we were launching our babies off to 100 years of good health. And that was absolutely wrong. I started practicing in Idaho and came across a large cohort of youth. These youth were joining an education program at 18 to 24 years of age. And what struck me was how unwell they were so early in life. I had thought it took 4 decades of suboptimal life choices to give you diabetes, heart disease, stroke. And what these youth showed me was, in fact, that just 4 years of a hormonally altered puberty, our kids are being launched into an adulthood that they didn't earn or deserve, that even they had no opportunity to provide informed consent for. And so at this point, I had just started my own family. And what happens when you start your own family, you suddenly feel responsible for all the children on the planet.
That's true.
All the children are your children's cohort. And you think, oh my goodness, this is absolutely wrong. We cannot have this happening. The healthcare model is completely out of date. We cannot have our children, between the ages of 10 and 14, before they have any opportunity to understand what's going on, interface with such poor health through basically lifestyle that happened on our watch. We created the refined carbs. We created the opportunity for 100% transport. You don't have to walk anywhere anymore. We created, screens to allow our children to be busy for hours on end. I think our age, we would actually have to go out and run around because otherwise we'd go stir crazy.
Yep. It's true. It's true. So you and I were speaking a couple of weeks ago, and you mentioned those 4 years in puberty and how critical they are to launching humans into the rest of their life. And it struck me because it is not something that is talked about regularly. It doesn't seem to be common knowledge. And yet you are seeing the after effects of refined carbs and lack of movement and probably too much screen time. And so seeing that triggered in you the questions about what are we doing? So let's now, here you are years later, you're no longer practicing medicine, correct? Actively?
Well, I'm not seeing patients, but I'm actively advising for startups in the health tech space.
Okay, so let's talk about the health tech space, because that is where you are now. It's where you're leading. You've written a book called Wealthcare, Demystifying Web3 and the Rise of Personal Data Economies. I would love for you to talk more about what is motivating you. Well, first of all, so you said our healthcare system is really out of date, and I don't think there's anybody listening that's going to disagree with you. You're looking to the future. Tell us more about what you're doing today and why it matters.
So yes, absolutely. The key realization with that experience was that we're no longer accidentally well. Our parents didn't have to know how to move us, how to feed us, to manage our sleep. We just basically got that, the basic expectations of our genetic material were served to us by our environment through basically no effort of our own. I mean, none of us paid any attention to puberty. We just came out the other side.
That's true.
And now that's no longer the case for young people because the conditions on the ground have changed so dramatically. And today we have a realization that as technology marches forward in this continuously unbridled fashion, we're beginning to understand that this technology could harm us. And especially now, given all of the conversation around AI and the future that will likely host artificial general intelligence, But I think that this conversation still suggests that technology is going to harm us in the future. And what I saw with, practicing and meeting all these young men and women was that technology is already harming society in ways that, of course, the children act as the canary in the coal mine and are able to show us that changing conditions on the ground so drastically, we can basically invent things over the weekend, and here they are with no ability to measure what is the impact in the society. And so I realized, okay, here we're in a world where conditions change so quickly that we are in desperate need of a fire hose of the truth, and a fire hose of the truth that teaches us quickly and efficiently what's actually happening on the ground. And the only group that can actually make that happen is us, ourselves, we the people having these health experiences. And yesterday we would have thought, well, that's way too much of an ask. We cannot ask people to share, what they're eating, how much they're moving, what their sleep is like. That is way onerous. And by the way, no one's interested in doing that. And what's happened over the last little while with the march of technology is clearly we've built now wearables and apps that release a lot of the burden of life logging. These things can happen spontaneously in the background. Just wear a wristwatch, wear a ring, put the odd sensor in your bed. You can start to digitize your physical health expression and make that available for individuals that, yes, you can help your own health, but we can help unleash a new understanding of health as it exists across our communities. And this is a level of intelligence that is not available to medicine today. Today, medicine, we just offer average. We treat everybody as a population. So if I were to be diagnosed with breast cancer tomorrow, I should expect an average outcome. There is no ability for me to ask for what I really want, which is an outlier outcome. I want
an exceptional outcome.
The best outcome that's ever happened in breast cancer. But today, healthcare doesn't have access to call it the minutia of events that are actually co-locate to allow a small group of individuals to actually have an outlier experience with their breast cancer.
Yeah.
And so fundamentally, even using AI, the AI doesn't have access to those data points, because what's in our EMR, or electronic medical record, that's not the information that separates us from each other, that separates us as individuals and really holds the secrets to why some of us are doing better than others.
Yeah. What's so fascinating about this model that you're envisioning is the agency that it gives each of us over our health, instead of just surrendering to a system that, if anybody has been in a hospital lately or any kind of medical facility, they're not happy places. I have, you guys have been listening to me for a while. I have a mother who, I take her to a lot of medical appointments, and I'm a witness to this average, okay, call it. And so here you are, Brigitte, with a vision for giving people agency. And yes, we have wearables. I mean, a lot of people wear an Apple Watch, for example, or a Fitbit, or they get the Ring, or they're tracking their own and then collecting their own data. But I think one thing in your book that you were talking about, and I will admit right openly, I have not read the whole thing, but I did open up and read some sections, because I wanted to at least have some sense of your thesis. And one of the things that you really are advocating is this idea of each of us collecting and managing our own health data, because we aren't here to be average. And yet the mountains of data that are pooled, and then one of the examples you gave me was, let's just say for exercise, if you run 30 minutes a day, you'll be healthy. Well, that's not true for everybody, right? But that's an average piece of advice, or it might have to do with what we eat. Some people say a couple of glasses of wine a night are perfectly fine. And another group says, stay away from alcohol entirely. Don't even touch the stuff. It's toxic, and there are cultures in the world where people live very long and they drink. And, so talk more about this vision for listeners who are just going to begin to wrap their heads around this. What does this mean moving forward for our, taking charge of our health when the system isn't set up to give us an exceptional experience?
Well, and perhaps we should help listeners understand why healthcare currently is, of course, not set up. And we don't want our healthcare industry to have access to the minutia of our lives. We would like to hold and control that privately, separately from healthcare.
Yes.
We only open up those pieces of health information that matter when we have a visit. And again, this is something that's relatively new. Healthcare in this new model, Web3 model, and perhaps we should define right now what's Web3 for our listeners.
Yes.
So that you can understand why this is different. So getting back to Web 1, that's the original internet that existed when we first saw the internet, and it was called the World Wide Web. Clearly a good name. It was available to everybody worldwide, the exact same thing as long as you had a connection. And it provided us with access to information that would be the same for you, the same for me if I asked for, a particular piece of the encyclopedia that had that information we were looking for. But what happened with Web 2, we increased the functionality of the internet such that you could now do commerce on the internet. And what quickly transpired is that you and I as individuals were not that capable of using this new Web 2 effectively. It was, in fact, the corporations that were very successful in building websites and creating e-commerce and providing a mechanism by which they could then pick up and track everybody's behavior while they went about their lives purchasing this, that, or the next thing. That created a huge data asymmetry, so that we now just have a handful of very large companies that understand our digital footprint, manage it, control it, and even decide how we should change our behaviors in the future. What we're talking about with Web3 is a correction, or what some might think of as sort of that final piece of functionality that's always been missing. This Web 2 allows us to have commerce, but it doesn't allow us to exchange value in a way that solves what blockchain and crypto enthusiasts call the double spend problem. What we can do with Web3 is provide a blockchain-based solution that very safely and securely cloaks our personality while allowing us to use pre-approved or predefined ways in which we want our data to be used. So it takes that, again, lifts that onerous job of all of us becoming tech savvy, gurus, which isn't going to happen, but provides us that infrastructure to say, yes, I would like to create a model by which my longitudinal health record can be tracked, managed, and largely owned by myself.
Yeah. Oh, ownership is so important in team. I hope, what Brigitte just shared, when she and I were talking before in preparation for this conversation today, and she explained, Web 1, Web 2, Web 3 to me, I literally, my mind was blown, and yours might be too, because when you think about the evolution of this thing called the internet, and how in the beginning it seemed so, I don't know, curious, and people, were claiming it was going to be a fad and everything. Well, in the last 20 years or so, that's what she's just described, is we have handed over so much of our personal lives to these very few companies, and they're using our information to, as she described, tell us what to think, what to do, how to behave. And Web3, as I understand it from what, you're describing, Brigitte, is it puts some power back into our hands. And when it comes to our health, that's the most important thing. We have nothing without our health. And so for me as a futurist, this is very exciting. But I know from reading your book and from, what you've already shared, that we are just in the very, very, very early stages and the infrastructure isn't there yet. So on the one hand, it's super exciting to think about, yes, I can have complete, control over my own health data and keep it private. The whole privacy conversation has been going on for quite some time. What's one of the biggest obstacles besides the obvious that the healthcare system is a behemoth? But as far as the infrastructure goes, what needs to happen in order for this vision to become reality?
Well, I think one of the key things, of course, is that with Web3, we're talking about a mathematically fortified internet. And so the complexity of that is beyond, you and I and the average person out there. So what really needs to happen is that the user or the user interface needs to become way easier to adopt and participate in. And we're seeing that happen more and more. It used to be that everybody had to establish their own wallet to participate in a Web3 ownership economy. But now we are seeing solutions where you can onboard with your current identities that you're used to, and then they can convert that over to a self-sovereign identity or a citizen-centric identity for you and do some of the hard lifting or the heavy work in the background. So
what's an example of that? Are you talking about what I use now, like my bank?
No, I'm talking about, what people use, their LinkedIn or their Google identity, and then they can onboard into a Web3 based solution using just the credentials that they're used to. So for instance,
got it. Okay.
For instance, in the cannabis industry, here's a good example of a group of people who are using a product that doesn't exist in sort of traditional medicine as we know it, in that it's a natural product, very difficult to generate a solid business model because it's hard to put intellectual property or IP attached that to natural products.
Yep.
And so what you have is a good example of a by the people, for the people fire hose of intelligence being generated, where the individual users of a particular cannabis product will log their experience along with the barcode of the product that they bought. That barcode provides us with seed to sale information. So we actually know the entire DNA structure of the particular natural product that they use. And then by sharing their human experience, by digitizing that physical event, turning it into zeros and ones in the form of, answering a questionnaire, using a device, perhaps watching the ebb and flow of their heart rate variability and other markers, they can create a compendium of understanding of that particular product that then can be shared with the wider group that is also looking for products that are natural for, be it sleep or pain or other reasons.
Sure.
And so this is a good example of where people are already working together to ensure that the intelligence moves forward at the pace of change, that we don't let any of our health experiences go to waste.
Yes.
It's halftime here at the Play Your Position podcast, and we've got ourselves a great game. While you're up grabbing another snack and topping off your favorite beverage, make sure to subscribe to the show so you never miss another play. PYP is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever great podcasts can be found. Now, let's get back to the game.
Yes, the pace of change. That's another thing that we're up against. That's a theme I noticed in your book, is that things are moving so quickly, and our human ability to keep up with it is just not there. And so, what can we do to mitigate some of that loss of information, because the day ends, right? Our day was full of everything we were doing. So as far as opportunity goes, and for people who are listening, who are business minded, and many of my listeners are, and we're looking at, you're certainly involved on the forefront here. You've written a book. As a side note, I would love for you to talk. I want to come back to this question I just asked, but I will just on as a side note, you recently partnered up with a company that put your book into an NFT form, a non-fungible token, which is a term that's associated with the blockchain and crypto. And some team, PYP, might be familiar with this. But tell us, we don't hear about a lot of authors making their books available as in that crypto world. Tell us why you did that, Brigitte.
So clearly, of course, it fits with the entire ethos of an ownership economy. Right now, when I use traditional routes such as Amazon publishing, my book is available through Amazon. If Amazon were to go away tomorrow, you could not buy my book. Or even the e-version of my book is hosted on Amazon or on Kindle or other hosting platforms. Again, you have that book on your Kindle as long as Kindle hosts that book for you. So you have ownership in a, should I call it, sort of second or third degree. You're not the primary owner. And the opportunity for the book to perhaps disappear or be censored or be somehow taken away from your ownership, even though you've purchased it, is always possible. With NFTs, and this is the opportunity now to create what we think of as a digital first book. It's digital completely. You purchase it through a digital platform. You read it on a digital device, your phone, your PC, your Kindle, whatever you want to use. And it is minted for you the minute you purchase it. And then it exists in a distributed manner such that it will never not exist. And it has an identifier that identifies, first of all, the book and the fact that you, the owner, owns it. And if you choose to, sell the book in a secondary sale, that's perfectly possible forever. And then you can even request follow-on royalties to that sale. So say you buy my book, Mary Lou, and you sell it to your friend, and then your friend sells it again, you can constantly receive royalties from those resales if that's what you choose to do.
Right. And that we're talking about buying your book through as an NFT, not as a physical book. So
right.
Yes. Okay. And again, it's such a new paradigm. It's exciting because you're experimenting. You're seeing but it comes back to this ownership economy. This putting the power back into the hands of individuals, and I think there's a growing groundswell of folks who are fed up with feeling like we've given away so much of our power. And yet our economy, our society, our culture is now so digitally, we're so enmeshed in this world of the internet, of Web 2.0. It's exciting to think about having opportunity to develop solutions that give us more ownership.
Yeah, I agree. Just what you said there, that many of us have given up. They thought, well, this is just the way it's going to be. There's no other way. There's no other possibility. And I'm hoping by creating a narrative like Wealthcare, people start to realize this isn't the only possibility. There is a conceivable way forward where we can go back to the ethos of the first internet, where each of us have that ability to own and manage our own digital lives. There's no question, more and more of our lives are going to be digital. Our social behavior is digital. Our education is more and more digital. Our vocation, the work we do, knowledge workers, that's more and more digital. And so many of us may have given up and said, oh, that's just the way it's going to be. And I hope that that is just a temporary thought, that we can restructure the thinking of our leadership to understand that this is not a fait complete. Like there is another opportunity here, and it's not unreasonable, and it's starting to happen in small pockets already, such as the cannabis example that I gave you. And of course, the other myth that we want to dispel is the fact that all of Web3 is about crypto and crime and fake money and fake businesses, and that's not at all the case. That this is really a mathematically fortified technology that has the opportunity to finally give us as a human species access to our full and complete truths. And that's something we can build together by all of us participating. And we don't have to just do it because we're good people, that there's a real wealth opportunity here to create a level of intelligence that we've never had access to before. You should think of healthcare as this sort of baseline intelligence for which we can then 10x, 100x, 1,000x that intelligence if we had the participation of the population at large. And for the first time, we have the ability to allow the population to participate in co-creation of our own health intelligence in very safe, effective, and secure ways.
And what's it going to take to reach that tipping point? Because we're not close to that yet. There's you use the word outlier. I mean, there are these pockets of outliers, people who are futurists like yourself, like myself, who see this and go, yes. And there's a rallying cry in that sense of this is possible. And there's excitement for here's that word for the average person running around just trying to keep their head above water. What's it going to take to reach the critical mass where we really do begin to see the widespread adoption of new behavior and new thinking?
Well, interestingly, I think that we're at a very perfect time right now, especially as more and more of us are becoming aware of AI and the sort of perils that might await us as that technology continues in an unbridled fashion. We've had concrete examples of the AI making incredibly harmful mistakes. And so, there's always still a human in the loop. But I think that we're realizing that just like we're not getting away from digital, we're not getting away from AI. We're going to be using that in the future more and more and more. And I think there's an opportunity here to realize that the number one thing that the AI needs in order to be safe and aligned with humans is access to a fire hose of truth coming from the ground coming at a dynamic, at that pace of change that allows the AI to have the training material it needs to figure out what is optimal for us and to actually deliver that, 100x, 1,000x intelligence that we talk about in terms of wealth creation. So this may be the ideal time, especially as more and more of our leadership is understanding AI is not going away. It's not working well. How do we actually build the guardrails to ensure that the AI progresses along the tracks that we're hoping it does? Interestingly, there's, the AHIP conference, which is a large healthcare payer conference, was just here in Portland last week. And the overwhelming sort of sentiment from that conference was that the business model is at risk. Like healthcare sees AI as a huge risk to the traditional brick and mortar, come and see your physician that has been reaping lots of profits for payers and others in the industry for decades. They're realizing this is not moving forward.
Yeah.
So that now we have an opportunity to have them, to have large industry players that are seeking new business models. Hopefully they'll start to say, okay, there is a new model here. Perhaps we don't just partner with patients to work, tinker with their health, but really partner with patients to create both health and health intelligence. Be that trusted partner or that digital fiduciary that puts in place the infrastructure so that patients don't just have a health experience that evaporates, but that they can fully digitize that health experience and make that health experience available to all future individuals, if we're still talking breast cancer, so that there's no breast cancer experience that goes to waste, that is safe and effectively co-located with the nuances that provided the outlier experience, and that is a new role for healthcare, that is a new mechanism by which healthcare can talk about a new business model of being that, providing that infrastructure, support, partnership, and of course, reaping a small transaction fee for each and every time our healthcare data is used.
Yeah, so let's talk about money, because you and I both know that, economic models are at risk here, that as they've been, Web3 already, if you've done any reading about it, is ushering in a new way of generating, wealth. And we're living in a time, nobody's immune to this, where the haves and the have-nots, that gap is as wide as it's ever been. And I know one of your rallying cries, Brigitte, is to bring more wealth to more people, and not just, to have a quality of life on a health level, but also on the ability to enjoy this, beautiful planet that's in peril. I think nobody's ignoring that either. So where is the wealth opportunity here in the grand scheme of things, from how you understand it?
So again, just thinking about, George Gilder's work, he said that there is no wealth creation where there isn't new knowledge creation. And we've been talking already about how we would co-create a massive extension of knowledge and intelligence, and that would underpin new products and services in ways that would be de-risked. In other words, the population has already identified that these are the things that work. And so there is this understanding that future wealth is, created through more access to more knowledge, more intelligence. But the other way you can start to think about this is us as individual data companies. Think of the stock exchange back in the 70s. There was about 600 companies. Now there's over, I think, 33,000 companies. And
wow.
Of course, the wealth creation that has been enabled by providing the infrastructure for those companies to occur is, similar to what we're talking about. You and I might have had a few transactions today. We picked up, a coffee, maybe bought something online. But imagine a future in which during this podcast, we would have had a couple hundred transactions happening on fractions of our data that we've pre-approved that are just occurring in the background while we're having this conversation. And so we're starting to see how traditionally we've only had, these handful of very large companies transacting on our data. Now open up the world where you and I can ask questions that we can't ask today. And the example has been, how do I become an outlier in breast health? Or how do I ensure that I can be kite surfing in my 70s? Because clearly those people exist. There's people out there on the water today kite surfing.
Yes, who are in their 70s. Yes.
I'm thinking none of that information is in their electronic medical record. All of that information as to why this is happening is actually in the minutia of their lives.
Which is lost at this point.
Right. And AI has no access to that currently. And then your question about this, asymmetry of wealth. One of the beautiful things about truth is truth needs both the good and the bad. Like, regardless of whether we're experiencing good health or poor health, both of those are incredibly important to finally answering that question as to what's truth, what's reachable for society. And so there's this sort of massive leveling effect where all of our health is valuable, regardless of where we are in our socioeconomic state. And in fact, all of the details around even those parameters are also valuable. And so we're in this situation where it's unlikely, as we've seen, machine learning without biological units, people providing that fire hose of truth to the machine learning, we're not going to achieve the futures that we're hoping for. And so perhaps now, finally, the large industry is waking up to the fact that partnering with society at large in these new ways is actually what's going to create a much bigger pie. We're not talking about taking away their market share. We're talking about all of us rolling up our sleeves and co-producing a much bigger pie.
Right. And everybody benefiting from those contributions. I was thinking about how cool would it be, because I went to the chiropractor today, that there was a microtransaction that benefited me. And I mean, getting adjusted helps me, right? But as far as the monetary, the economic exchange, for me being rewarded for my, I think that's kind of the picture you're painting here, is that if I choose to eat some organic broccoli and, with a free-range chicken dinner, that everybody benefits. The farmer benefits, wherever I bought, the store that I bought it from, and I benefit, right? Like that's, am I right in thinking that's the future that you're painting a picture of a little bit here?
Oh, absolutely. Right now, there's no incentive for you to track those things.
No, there's not.
If there was a way in which tracking those things was very, dirt simple for you, and you were able to understand, again, this is how your healthcare provider could help you. Say, Mary Lou, if you're going to track your dietary and movement with these simple sensors and apps, then your lab values will be much more valuable in the open market. Because just providing your HDL at 75, yes, that's a great number, but that's not useful for anybody because we have no idea how you got that. And
but it's that accumulative effect of tracking that, like you say, the minutia over time. That's what becomes that's the value. That's the gold.
Exactly. And then we're in a place where we can start to really personalize medicine. So right now, you and I, and probably everyone on this call, we all have exactly the same laboratory thresholds for cholesterol, which makes no sense at all.
No, it makes zero sense, except for the company selling drugs.
Yeah, exactly. Because they just need a cut point for when it's time to write a prescription.
Exactly.
But again, we don't want to be in this constant state of on standby until we hit a threshold for a prescription. We would like to know what's reachable for us right now at this decade of our life, such that we never reach the threshold for a prescription, that we push that threshold into the future at a time when we're 150 and have left the planet.
Wow. Okay, team, I'm going to interject here a minute and just emphasize, can you hear the opportunity that exists with these kinds of changes? That the universal law, the law of polarity, says every front has a back, every good has a bad, right? So we all get that. And this means letting go and losing some things that are familiar and perhaps comfortable because they're familiar, the way we've been doing things up until this point. At the same time, think about from a business standpoint, if you can come up with a solution for what I just described for myself, that could be a business that transforms not just your life, but the lives of millions of people. So today's conversation with Brigitte, I'm hoping, is stimulating for you, if you're an inventor, if you have ideas for businesses, if you're already in a business like cannabis or know people who are in the cannabis industry, think about what is possible here. And I'm going to encourage you to get Brigitte's book. It's again called Wealthcare, Demystifying Web3 and the Rise of Personal Data Economies. We all need to take a vested interest in personal data economies. That's one of the many reasons I wanted to have you on the show today, Brigitte, is because you really are a leader in this movement. And gosh, we could keep talking so much, but we're coming up on an hour, and I think you've really painted a fantastic picture of where we've been, where we are now, where we're going, and how these emerging technologies fit in. Certainly, there's so much more behind the scenes. So for people who'd like to learn more about you and the work you're doing, where do you hang out online?
So I am on LinkedIn at Brigitte Piniewski, and you can reach me there. I do post small bits of the book and other commentary on LinkedIn. So if you prefer short versions, that's a good place to find them.
Okay. And team, you know that links to connect with Brigitte will be on her show notes page at pyppodcast.com. I will also have a link for her book that you can buy on Amazon, the physical book. And I encourage you to get into her world. It's so brilliant. And again, a futurist of the tallest order. Now, I would love for you, Brigitte, to share some resources with listeners that have been instrumental on your leadership journey. And also if there's a couple of other places they might go to expand their knowledge of this emerging technology known as Web3, and also, the whole the NFTs, the crypto, the blockchain, all the stuff that you move in.
Absolutely.
Let's start with the books.
Yeah, so we mentioned George Gilder already. He wrote Life After Google, The Fall of Big Data and the Rise of the Blockchain Economy. Just, very, very useful and well-written. Of course, George Gilder, amazing. And then, of course, Max Tegmark, his Life 3.0, Being Human in the Age of Artificial Intelligence, also an incredible eye-opener. And then don't miss, I know it's a large one, but The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, The Fight for a Human Future at the New Frontier of Power by Shoshana Zuboff, also an amazing author. If you like podcasts, the Ownership Economy podcast is a really good mechanism as well while you're driving. And then Coinbase is a web place that has a ton of educational information. So they'll, have all the basics there. If you look at Coinbase.com, you can take their education in terms of, very beginning things. What is blockchain? Why does it matter? What is Ethereum? What is layer one? All of these questions can be answered through Coinbase education.
Yeah, and I can vouch for Coinbase. I invested in some Bitcoin back in 2017, kind of on a lark. And I have my Coinbase account, and it's fun to go in there and every now and then go, oh, look at where my initial investment is. I've never lost money. I've only gained. I mean, my account has gone up and down, but my initial investment is still intact, if that's what I meant.
Okay, good.
Yeah. And so these are great. Thank you so much for the book recommendations and the podcast. And then team, again, I will put links to all of these on her show notes page over at pyppodcast.com, because it's a lot. There's a lot to take in today. But Brigitte, you are so skilled at explaining complexities in a way that makes us think, gives us some direction, and definitely, I mean, I feel very fortunate that our paths have crossed, and I'm grateful that you were willing to come on the show today and enlighten us about what's going on and what's possible. A lot to think about today.
Yeah, and there's so much we didn't have time for, right? We didn't even touch on DAOs as a mechanism for collaboration. Of course, leadership is all about catalyzing collaboration and organizing groups into figuring out what needs to get done and how we're going to do it. And there's a whole section on just understanding that we have new ways of interacting with each other through DAOs. I touch on that in the book as well, but I'm happy to help if anybody needs more information. Don't hesitate to reach out.
Yeah, and I'll have to have you back because I would love to talk about DAOs. They're again this part of it, and we'll hold space for that. So thank you so much for doing what you do, for being a leader in this emerging space, and for really advocating for what matters most, which is our health. I really appreciate you, Brigitte, so much.
Well, and I appreciate you making it so easy for me, Mary Lou. Thank you.
Hey team, Mary Lou here. Who's number one in football changes from year to year. Fashion trends come and go, same with musical tastes. But leadership skills, they never go out of style. In fact, these days, leadership is an essential survival skill for a world that demands more from us than ever before. To succeed these days, you need to know how to show up for yourself so that you can then do the work you love with people you like the way you want. The Play Your Position Leadership Playbook helps you do this, and it's free. Go to pyppodcast.com to download your copy today. If being more successful this year, next year, in the 21st century is on your to-do list, get your copy of the Play Your Position Leadership Playbook now. pyppodcast.com. It's at the top of the page. You can't miss it. That's pyppodcast.com, and start being more of the leader you are meant to be today. This podcast was produced by Daniel Romeros. Show notes for this episode can be found over at pyppodcast.com. I'm Mary Lou Kaiser. Thanks for listening.
Here at the Play Your Position podcast, we believe that the road to self-mastery and a life well lived starts with answering the call to leadership. That's when the fun really begins. Send this episode to any friends who might need to hear the inspiration and ideas you heard today. And feel free to rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform.